What is up guys, my name is Chase and Google has announced that their video game streaming service called Stadia is going to be shutting down on January 18th, 2023. And it's very sad because a lot of people, whether it's game devs or the actual team behind Stadia, I'm sure they have put so much time and effort in this little project, only to randomly find an announcement that it's going to be shutting down after I think 4 or 5 years. So Google announced that they would have a video game streaming service back in 2019. Well, it wasn't until 2021 when I finally decided to try out Stadia. I picked up the Google Stadia Premier Edition from Best Buy while they were running a 50% off deal. The Stadia Premier Edition comes with the Stadia Controller, a Chromecast Ultra, and a free trial of the Stadia Pro membership. Finally getting my hands on Google Stadia and giving it a try, I had a lot of very interesting findings. The thing that makes it so hard to talk about with Google Stadia is that every person's experience is going to be different because everybody's individual living conditions will affect the internet performance. And honestly, that is one of the biggest problems I had with Stadia, is that it's not similar to streaming services like Netflix or Hulu, where those services are just streaming basically a video file. With Stadia, where it's actually streaming a video game, it relies on a lot of other factors like, pressing a button and having that input go through the cloud system. I feel like video game streaming is a lot more complex than just regular media streaming, which I think already puts Google Stadia in a very difficult spot. So anyway, as for my personal experience, I have an internet connection of about 100 megabit per second download and around 10 or 11 megabit per second upload, which by today's standards I know isn't like the best internet, but the feedback I got from Google Stadia is that it should run like okay. So I guess we'll start with the things I liked about Google Stadia, and then later on we'll move on to the things I didn't like with Google Stadia. The first thing I liked about Stadia is that it actually worked. Given everything I just talked about for the past few minutes, I was actually quite surprised to be sitting there seeing a video game being streamed to me. The first game I tried out was SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated, which I mean isn't like the most intensive video game that you can play on a streaming service. I mean, that game works on the Nintendo Switch, it even works on smartphones, but I mean just the concept of it was really cool. The fact that I was playing this game that was going through, Google's servers and then coming to me without any waiting for downloads or anything like that, it was honestly pretty surreal. I also wanted to try out a more intensive game on Stadia, so I ended up trying out Destiny, and once again I was quite surprised to actually be playing Destiny through the cloud. This is a pretty intense first-person shooter, and for the most part things were working perfectly fine. It was completely playable. So I think in the end I have to admit that Google Stadia did in fact deliver the bare minimum of what it was saying. I was in fact able to stream video games through the cloud. I'm trying to think what else I liked about Stadia, not gonna lie. I don't know, the controller was pretty good. I do actually like this controller a bit. I would say the Stadia controller is like a cross between all of the major video game controllers. The analog sticks are in the center, so it's kind of like PlayStation, but then they also have this rubbery texture around the edges, which is similar to the Xbox, and then the button layout is very similar to the Nintendo Switch. So it has a lot of similarities to, most major video game controllers, and yeah, for the most part, it feels very nice to use. Not gonna lie, I think that's pretty much everything I liked about Stadia. Just the fact that it worked was really impressive, but at that point, it almost just feels like a science experiment, It's like, oh, hey, I'm playing a video game through the cloud, cool. It's not my preferred way to play video games, it's just a cool little thing to try. So let's move on to the things I did not like about Google Stadia. I think the biggest issue I had with Google Stadia was that it was just very clunky. So while I was setting up my Google Stadia Premier Edition, I had to get the Google Stadia app on my phone. I had to make an account on there. I had to connect the controller to the Google Stadia app and then hook up the Google Chromecast, pick a game on my phone and then download it to the Chromecast. It just felt very clunky that I had to get my phone, get this video game controller, get the Chromecast, all for Google Stadia to just work. And it also becomes very confusing when it's at least on iPhone, in order to play Google Stadia on your iPhone, you can't use the Google Stadia app, which feels like a very, very missed opportunity to me. Instead, you have to go into Safari and go onto Google Stadia's website, and then you can play your Stadia games. And then you're left with the Safari border on your phone while you're trying to play Bomberman or something. And it's pretty much the same deal on the computer. You have to go to Google Chrome and then go to the Stadia website website and then you can play Stadia, but you're still using the Chrome browser. It just feels very clunky to use. I imagine they were just trying to make it, easier for everyone to use. You don't need any kind of software, you just use your internet browser. Like, that's very simple, I get that. Just the whole experience of using it did not feel any easier than, going on your Switch or your Xbox or your PlayStation and just downloading a game. In fact, I would say it's more complicated than that. And listen, I'm sorry because I know that there are a lot of die-hard Stadia fans. Once again, I will say that it's very impressive that it works. I just wish that the way it was executed was a little bit easier. And then the other thing about Google Stadia, which I kind of touched upon earlier, obviously since this does rely on an internet connection, I found that there was actually a bit of input delay. Not a crazy amount where it completely ruined the game. As I said, the games were completely playable, but that was pretty much it. It was playable, but there was still that tiny bit of delay. So you're definitely not going to want to play like competitive gaming on Google Stadia, which is a bit odd because they do offer Mortal Kombat on here. And speaking of games, I will say I wasn't super duper impressed with the game library that I at least saw on Stadia, and I think I'll leave it at that because I know that everybody has different interests in gaming. But just to kind of wrap things up here, as I said earlier, I think Google Stadia, if anything, made for a very interesting experiment. The fact that you could actually stream games through the cloud without having to do any downloading or without having to buy a physical game or anything, it was very cool. It was really cool to see that actually work right in front of my eyes. But that's the thing, that Stadia just felt like a cool experiment, and that was it. Personally, I couldn't imagine this being my primary way of gaming. I think this is just something cool for people to try out. Maybe as like a secondary option to your PlayStation or Xbox or whatever. Man, I feel bad ending this video on kind of a downer. But once again, I'm very impressed that Stadia works, do not get me wrong. It's very cool that technology has come this far where we can actually stream video games. In any case, feel free to let me know in the comments what you guys think of Google Stadia. If you want to see my unboxing of the Stadia Premier Edition, feel free to check it out below. For now, thank you so much for watching. My name is Chase, and I will see you guys again soon. Bye.